Have you ever looked at, I guess, what would be the podcast album artwork of ours? Like if you took out 32 Thoughts and replaced it with Friedman and Bukauskas Injury Law, I don't think anyone would bat an eye.
That's pretty funny.
The way we got our arms crossed.
Have you been run over by a bicycle? Call B&E. We'll take care of you. No fees unless you get paid.
At Friedman and Bukauskas Injury Law, you don't pay us for our thoughts. You pay us to win.
This is not a real advertisement for paid legal services. If you call Elliotte Friedman or Kyle Bukauskas to defend you in a court of law, you will lose. Again, please do not call Kyle Bukauskas or Elliotte Friedman. No attorney-client relationship is formed by listening to this advertisement. Legal services provided and subject to the qualifications of the attorney. Consult with an attorney for legal advice. Fees may apply. Client is responsible for cost regardless of outcome.
Okay, welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast brought to you by the GMC Sierra AT4X. Dom, Elliotte, and Kyle all with you. Apologies if you were hoping for someone else.
Yeah, we're sorry, not sorry if you were hoping for someone else. But, you know, one thing I was wanting to do is I was listening to you read the open there. And you know what? I was thinking, I believe GMC has been with us since day one. Longest serving sponsor for sure. And just want to say thanks. It hit me as you were saying it. Just want to say thanks.
Great. And I honestly am not just saying this, Elliotte. I grew up in a General Motors family. All of our vehicles, not that we had a ton, but my dad is a bit of an old-time car collector, all from the General Motors family as a kid.
Whenever someone says this, they're aiming for a free car.
Yes. Oh, we've all got a little bit of that in us, don't we?
What's our favorite price?
We're suckers for free.
Yes.
If it's free, we will come. All right, well, a lot to get to in this episode, Elliotte. Busy night in the NHL on Thursday. All 32 teams were in action on Tuesday night. Before we get to what was going on the ice on Thursday, Elliotte, you reported back in August that Jeff Vinik, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were beginning a multi-stage sale process to Doug Ostrover and Blue Owl Capital. So bring us up to speed after what the organization announced on Thursday.
Yes. So, you know, as we reported at the time, it wasn't going to be a single stage sale process. And I think we'd mentioned that it was Vinik who was going to keep operational control for 3 years. Well, they formally announced that on Thursday morning. It's going to be 3 years, and eventually the new ownership group will take over control of the team. I think that was something that was very important to the league. The Lightning have gone from one of the franchises they were most concerned about to one of their most stable and successful franchises under Vinik, and they wanted to make sure that stayed. But the other thing I heard on Thursday was, Kyle, is that $20 million of the sale price is going to be awarded as bonuses to the full-time employees of Vinik Sports Group. I think he's got about 300 employees there. Yeah, 300 employees there. And so there's going to be bonuses. It's probably around $50,000 a person, but it's about $20 million he's going to spend and distribute to the full-time staff as part of the sale, which I think is a fantastic gesture. The question I immediately asked after this was, if I apply for a job and get it, am I eligible for one of these bonuses? If I decide, you know, Dave Randorf's been there for too long, or Paul Kennedy's been part of the broadcast for too long, and I want to come down there and replace them, will I qualify? And sadly, I was told, Kyle, that it's not going to work. I tried to look up, I did a quick Google search. This was by no means extensive. Has anything like this happened before? The one thing you go back is when Maple Leaf Gardens was built in 1931, the carpenters were paid in shares of Maple Leaf Gardens Limited because Conn Smythe didn't have all the money. So he paid them in shares, which turned out to be very lucrative for them. I'm sure there might be other examples. People might be able to tell us. But, obviously Jeff Vinik did very well on the sale of this team. When Jeff Vinik bought the team, he accepts the risk. He puts the financial power behind it. He built up the area, and if it goes wrong, obviously he's the one that is most in danger of losing out. All of that said, you're not successful without a great team around you. And I like to hear and I like to see the fact that those people are going to be rewarded a little bit for how they helped build the Lightning for what they were when he bought them to what they are now. They deserve it, and I'm glad to see that happen.
That's not the only Conn Smythe reference that will be made in this podcast episode, by the way, Elliotte. And that's really impressive, too. I just wanted to add on to that. I mean, we hear the saying all the time that good ownership wins. And you think about, as you say, where the franchise was at when he first took over in 2010, the back-to-back Stanley Cups, 2 other trips to the Stanley Cup final in 2015, 2022, and I believe 3 trips aside from those ones to a conference final too, a consummate team that's been in the playoffs, a full building. The other thing too, Elliotte, and from doing games down there, they do an incredible job with some of their community hero programs, members of the military that they honor every home game, and the amount of money that is fed back into the Tampa community through all of that. Having seen that for years down there, I can't say I'm totally shocked, though I am incredibly impressed when you say that that's what Vinik plans to do with some of the money here for the full-time staffers down there. That's really neat.
Well said. Very well said.
All right. So that's what's going on down in Tampa. We'll actually go back down there in a little bit, but first, as we go through what went on Thursday night on the ice, Elliotte, it's, speaking of Tampa, the Leafs beat the doors off of the Lightning Monday night. It seemed like nothing could be going better for Toronto, Craig Berube and company when they left the building Monday at home. Since then, outscored 11-3, lost to Columbus on the road, and then in what felt like it was a pretty sizable game with St. Louis coming to town, Berube's first time facing his old team, they dropped that one 5-1 at home. Meanwhile, you've got the Bruins. They've lost 4 of 5.
Suddenly your game on Saturday, like you're going to Boston on Friday today. Yeah. Suddenly that game that you're going to has a really big aura about it now. And not aura the way kids talk about it, like you've got aura. Aura as around this becomes a really big game, really early in the season between 2 teams who you wouldn't think would be in the positions they'd be in.
Well, Elliotte, because there was already some tension building around that game anyways, because it's the Leafs in Boston. It will be their first meeting since the playoffs last year. And now you add in how the weeks have gone, this week has gone for both teams. There's a different feel altogether, and we're still a day away from it. You can feel the tension building both sides. Why don't we start with Toronto and what you've seen over the last couple of games where it's gone from the top of the roller coaster and it's taken a bit of a spill?
See, imagine Toronto as a car, okay? And you're on a highway and there's a fork in the road. And at one side, it's the fork that says calmness, continue playing good hockey, all things going well. And the other side says, we can't have this. Chaos. And the Leaf car wants to go onto the calm side, but because it's the Maple Leafs It has to veer into the insane side. It's almost as if there's
the steering
a magical,
wheel's broken.
It's like Christine, right? Like Christine has the Stephen King's Christine. It's the car. It's just taking control and going over to the chaos side. I mean, the Columbus game didn't bother me too much. You're going to have stinkers and that happens. But that's the second time this year. Remember, Toronto went into New Jersey, and that was a big game for Sheldon Keefe. And New Jersey coughed up a hairball in that one. And now, Toronto, it's a big game for Craig Berube, even though he's downplaying it all and saying he doesn't even know where his Stanley Cup ring is and all that stuff. These guys have pride. They want to win. Like, if I was a player, if I played for the Devils that night of Keefe, or I played for the Maple Leafs this night of Berube, it would bother me that having the results that we had. And that's the thing. Like, they didn't play very well. I mean, I could just imagine Oilers fans pretending not to look at their eyes burning off when they looked at the game summary and saw the first goal was Broberg and the second one was Holloway. So it was a bad night for the Leafs, and it was a bad night for the Oilers. Their fans catching strays and they're not even there. Like, all of a sudden, like, the era of good feeling, like you said it Monday night, when they not only beat Tampa on the ice, they beat them up too. Like, they manhandled them and they stood up to them and everybody was feeling great. And 3 days later, it's the crazy off ramp again. And we're going into Boston and they're going to be a wounded bear too. Like, I cannot believe the Bruins. Like, I am shocked at this, and I never would have predicted it. They look completely discombobulated.
They can't stay out of the penalty box, Elliotte. I believe they've spent the most time shorthanded in the league already this year. They gave up 3 more while a man short, and it feels like the last week that's been the one thing Jim Montgomery is preaching. We've got to stay out of the box, got to stay out of the box. It was their Achilles heel again. Dallas got rolling in the second period. I was watching their broadcast, the Nesson broadcast, saying that was one of the worst starts to a period they've seen from them in a long, long time. And on top of that, so Monday's episode, we talked about Jim Montgomery giving it to Marchand pretty good in the Utah game last weekend. Thursday morning, Brad Marchand was asked about it for the first time. His response:
I mean, people are very sensitive these days, and there's a lot of it's unfortunate how coaches are scrutinized over things like that. There's a lack of accountability nowadays because people can't handle the heat, and you make a mistake like that, you deserve to hear about it. I'm glad that he said something about it. If he didn't, we would have a much bigger issue. So, that the fact that that's something that we're talking about is, it's disappointing, but that's the way things are today.
I'm not surprised by that one bit. He has said that before about things like people are too soft and they shouldn't be complaining about these things. So, and like I said at the time, like, that wouldn't bother me. Now, if it's happening all the time, it would bother me because I think my team is falling apart. But one-offs like that wouldn't bother me at all, Kyle. And I'm not surprised he felt that way. What is interesting to me is that it's happening in a few different places right now. For example, in the second period the other night, Berube, in that Leaf game we talked about, Berube gave it to the first line. Didn't like the way they were playing. Again, it wasn't anything over the top, but he gave it to them, and that's the thing. Like,
seen it a few times already.
Yes, and you know what? And in Toronto, that's going to be a thing. That's going to be a thing. But again, like, I don't see why anybody should have a problem with it. And the other place where it's happening right now is Vancouver, and the Canuck fans are agog about whatever happened in practice the other day between Miller and Pettersson. And I have a whole other theory on this, but I just find it really interesting that we're, basically 2.5 weeks into the season, and tempers seem, really short. And obviously it's not going well for Boston. It started going really well for Toronto, and there's been 2 tough games back to back. And what it says to me is that Craig Berube is putting his foot down right away. He wants the right habits. He's gonna hammer those habits into the team. But the Vancouver one is interesting because they've had some bad results, but generally I think they're pretty good. And they just came out of their road trip really nicely with a couple of really good games. But do you want to hear my theory on this whole Pettersson thing?
I think the entire West Coast has been waiting for your theory, Elliotte. So yes.
Well, good, because if not, this was going to be a really short podcast. It was going to be over very quickly. So, do you know the difference between sales and service?
Yeah.
Okay. So sales is, we want your business. So we're going to do whatever it takes to get you in here. Okay? Whatever you want, we're going to do it until you sign on the dotted line and you're a customer. Service is, after we've signed you, we don't need you as much. Kind of hard to get us on the phone. So it's always a joke. Everything is great when it's sales. Everything is much harder when it's service. Oh, really? Where's all that great way you treated me when you wanted my business? Now that you got it, not so good. Except at GMC. Service always great at GMC. I think this is sales and service on Pettersson. Last year was, we got to get this guy to sign. We want this over with. We want this done with. We want a commitment from Pettersson, or we're moving on. You remember when I sat down with him last year before the playoffs, he said he never thought he was going to get traded. I think there were people in the organization who were ready to do it, but as Pettersson said at the end of the day, he was going to sign, so he wasn't concerned about it. Okay? So the Canucks got their sales done. Pettersson signs, 8 years, $11.6 million. He's a Canuck. He's a great talent. Now we're in service. Okay? Even though the Canucks signed Pettersson, I think they felt there was another level or 2 levels that they felt they needed to get him to. I think it was felt that as great as he is, they needed him to be tougher. I don't know if meaner is the right word, but tougher. Now, some people are not wired that way, but I think they felt he was wired that way and is wired that way, but they had to encourage him to get there. And what I also believe, young Bukauskas, is that they didn't want it to be up to Rutherford or Alvin or Tocchet to do it. They really believe in their leadership group. They believe that Hughes is a strong captain, and they believe that Miller is a strong alternate captain, and that their group is a strong group. And I think they said, you guys are the ones that are going to have to do it. And, Miller's obviously taking that very literally. I think in that practice, and I think there have been some talks off the ice, but I think Hughes is involved too. I just think that Hughes would take that so seriously as a responsibility of his is. I think you're insane if you don't think that he is trying to do that too. Now, I think there are limits. You can't go too far, but like we've seen Montgomery push Marchand, we've seen Berube push the Maple Leafs. I think the Canucks see it as it might be better for Pettersson if it comes from his teammates as opposed to the coach or the GM. I think what the Canucks have said to their leadership group is, Elias needs to get to another level. You all see it, and we want you guys to get him there. And I think they see it, They understand it, and they're trying to push him there. And I think the message comes harder from some guys, Miller, as opposed to other guys like Hughes. But I think that's the goal here. I think they feel that tough love is the way, or like in the world, if we want to be successful, we have to be prepared sometimes for honest, maybe tough criticism, as long as it's meant properly. We all have to deal with that from time to time. And I think that's what the Canucks are trying to do here. Now, I think there's a couple other things at play. I think that I don't think he always likes it. I think they're hoping he will understand that it's to make them win, but I don't think he always likes it. I do think there's, I don't know how serious it is, but I don't think he's 100%. So I can't answer that in terms of what percentage he's at, but I think it's a factor. The biggest thing I think he feels is that, I think a lot of players, they almost prefer it when the criticism comes from, or the constructive criticism comes like down the chain of command, whether it's manager, coach. You don't always like it when it's your teammates, because your teammates are supposed to have your back. But also, teammates are as good as anybody, even where we work, Kyle. When you're acting, or you're not yourself, or you're not right, or you're not performing to your best ability. Like, sometimes I find it's my teammates who tell me when I'm not doing my best job. And I think that's the way the Canucks see it here. The other thing I would like to say is, in the last podcast, we talked about him being on top of social media too much. Well, someone called me and said he didn't go far enough. And I go, okay, what did I miss? And he said his friends are sending him stuff too and telling him stuff. And that is the worst. The worst. So a few years ago, I think I've told this story before, Kyle, but in case I haven't, a few years ago, we were doing the NHLPA media tour, and there was a player there, and I won't say who it is, although I will say one NHL coach texted me and guessed who it was. He nailed it. But, he said, I won't say who it is. And I said hi to him, and he looks at me and goes, I know what you guys say about me. And I go, what? And he said, I know what you're being my friend. I know what you guys say about me on TV. And I said, what are you talking about? And I said, look, and he had a really skewed view of it. And I said, do you watch it? And he goes, no, my family tells me about it. I can't remember if he said his fiance or his partner or his family. And I said, look, here's my number. If you ever have a problem with anything, you reach out to me directly. Secondly, I'm going to give you a piece of advice here. The next time a family member says to you, or a friend says to you, this is what this person said about you on television, tell them if they do it one more time, you are cutting them off from communication. And he laughed. And I go, no, I'm serious, because I guarantee to you, those people make it sound worse than that it really is. They warp it. They always make it sound worse than reality. And I'll tell you this. So he said, okay. And the next time I saw him, he said, I really appreciate you telling me that, because number one, it wasn't as bad as you said. And number two, ever since people stopped talking to me about it, I feel so much better. I'm just not obsessing about this stuff or brooding about this stuff. And I said, totally true. And again, I told him, if you have a problem, send me a note. And he never has. So what I look at is this. If you're a friend of Pettersson's and you're sending him clips or transcripts, or saying this guy said something about you in Vancouver or Toronto, wherever it is, stop doing that. You are not being a good friend. That makes the problem worse. He doesn't need that. I think just at the end of the day, besides, if Rick Dollywall says anything, nobody understands it anyway because he talks too fast. But I think at the end of the day,
hey.
I think at the end of the day, the goal here from the Canucks is if this guy can get a little bit of a thicker skin, he's going to be unstoppable. We need to push him to be that player. You can't go too far. There are lines you cannot cross. But this is what the Canucks, I really believe, are trying to do. The number one thing I would do if I was Pettersson is I went back today and I watched, remember his first game, the goals he was scoring, the fun he was having. He has to rediscover that. He came over as this almost blissfully naive guy and started dominating the league immediately. Whatever that was inside of him at that time, he has to get back to that. I think there is still a great player there, there. And we've got to get that back out of him.
As I said on Monday's episode too, I hope he finds joy in the game again, or continues to find joy in the game again. That brings out, as you say, what we saw when he first came to Vancouver 6 years ago. My other takeaway from your theory, Elliotte, and it's a very good one, is that you're trying to peddle the narrative that NHLers, family members are out to get you.
I will say
cut them all out of your life.
95% of the NHL family members I've met are great people, but they warp stuff that's said about their kids or friends or cousins or brothers or sisters. Don't do that. Only tell them the good things. Only tell them the good things.
Yes. All right. Very good, Elliotte. So from all that's gone on in Vancouver, what's going on in Toronto and Boston, meanwhile, kind of
how much, by the way,
here,
before we go to where you're about to go here, how much patience do you think Boston's going to have? They just made a lot of changes.
That's the one thing. And you know what's, and they're just not used to this too, right? So the last 2 years under Jim Montgomery, they are a combined 16-1-1 in the month of October. Like just incredible starts to the season the last 2 years. Now, you're not going to do that every time. A regression from that doesn't mean you're a bad team, but this is just something they haven't gone through since Montgomery's been at the helm there. So I imagine there's a bit of a shock to the system here. So I just watching them, they're not the Bruins we're used to seeing yet, but I still think they can get back there. The penalties are a big part of it, though. Like, it just kills them then they end up chasing the game. And as things are still coming together offensively for them, it's made it tough. It's made it really tough.
I can't believe how undisciplined they are. It's amazing to me. But, they made a lot of changes. I don't know how often. Sometimes unless you really think that somebody you got just isn't going to work there, you probably have to grind it out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Bruins fans are calling for a little Fabian Lysell action too, for a little extra offensive scoring bump.
I saw that. There seems to be a real desire to have him brought up. Generally, I think you don't do that. You don't want to be forced into things like this, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and it's not desperate, but it's getting there. We're a week away from my November 1st stat. It's very hard to make the playoffs in this league if you're more than 4 points out on November 1st. Very hard. The loser point makes it really difficult. And they're starting to really look up at the rest of the Eastern Conference. Sorry, bud, where were you going? I interrupted you.
No, that's all good. All building towards Saturday night at the Garden. I was just going to touch on Elliotte here. Quietly through all of this, the Minnesota Wild, they've lost a couple beyond regulation, haven't lost in regulation yet this year. They won again on Thursday, 4-2 over Tampa. You started your latest 32 Thoughts blog this week talking about Kirill Kaprizov. He on Thursday, 2 goals, 1 assist, over 22 minutes of ice time. Another night for him, as you say, been one of the most used forwards in the entire league out of the gate here.
So they've played 7 games now. He's got points in 6 out of 7 of them. And in 5 of those games, it's multiple points. So he's got 5 games with at least 2 points, 1 game with 1, and 1 game with 0. And he's playing more than, as you mentioned, every other winger in the league. And this is a season, and they are getting great goaltending. Fleury won. Like, that was a big win. Fleury got them a win there. And Gustafsson looks really good. I don't know what the deal was, but I heard he was pretty close to getting traded this year. They had something for him, and they didn't do it.
In the summer?
I think it was in the summer. I heard they had a deal where he was going, and obviously it didn't happen, and he's back. And he looks fantastic. Like, there's so much on the line this year in Minnesota, and we've talked about how they have to prove to him that they're good enough. I think the other thing, it's pretty clear, and we'll see how long this can last, but the other thing is pretty obvious that they've decided that one of the ways we could make Kaprizov stay here is he's going to get to play a lot. He's going to get to play a ton. He's going to get to play even more than he has played in the past. And it's like, this year, it's like we're going to do everything we can to make him happy, including never tell him he has to stay on the bench.
All right. You choose when you want to come off, Kirill.
Yeah. It was like that great Kovalev shift with the Rangers and Mike Keenan, where they were trying to punish him by saying, you stay out there for 5 minutes, and he didn't get it was a punishment. He absolutely loved it. Like, his Kaprizov's ice time has been going up every year. It was 18, 19, 20, 21. Last year it was 21 and a half. This year he's at 22, but I don't know if this can continue, but he's definitely going to play more than he ever has. It's, it's all playoffs this year for Minnesota. And how are they going to do it? Kaprizov, you go out there and you don't come off.
It's not a bad recipe for success.
Hey, man, play your best player. Never bad. Good coaching strategy. Who's my best player? We're going to play him.
So a big win for Minnesota down in Tampa. We should shout out Sergei Bobrovsky, fastest goalie in NHL history to 400 career wins. Took him 707 games. Panthers beat the Rangers at Madison Square Garden after
I could watch those two teams
down
in another playoff series. That was a good game.
I was just going to say, conference final last year and another great one on Thursday night in Manhattan.
Oh, by the way, we should mention that the Rangers sent down Matt Rempe after the game tonight. Now, I don't know if there's another player, like a depth player, who would get as much attention for going to the minor leagues as Rempe would. I think that's credit to him and everything he's done in a very short NHL career. But the kid put in the work last summer, and I can't find fault with this. And he needs to play. And it's pretty clear right now that, he doesn't fit with what they're doing yet. So I know he's a big name. I have no problem with this. If they think it's best for him to go down there and play, I can't argue with that. It's his age, and with everything he's trying to improve, he should be playing. 100% he should be playing.
I'm with you. Johnny Brodzinski seems to have the eye of Peter Laviolette in the meantime, and if that's the case, get him more minutes down in the American League in the time being. And when the moment comes that you could use the Rempe jolt again, you have to think he'll be better prepared for it after actually playing as opposed to sitting on the sidelines through all that time. So good point bringing that up. How about Detroit, Elliotte? Like, I feel this time last week we were talking about them, the Sabres, Ottawa, those teams in the Atlantic that seem to be spinning their wheels yet again out of the gate. This is a huge week for the Wings. They beat New Jersey on Thursday. They've won 3 in a row. What are you seeing out of Motown of late?
I think they should have a new strategy. Concede 20 shots and see where that gets them. Like, just give the other team right at the start.
Like the shot differential?
Yes. You give the other team 20 shots, like right away, and then we'll start the game. They got outshot, 27-10 by the Islanders. They won 1-0 behind the savior, Alex Lyon. And then they got outshot, 40-20 by the Devils. And Cam Talbot beat them. Markstrom had a rough night. He had a really rough night. Like, we talk about, is Kaprizov playing all these minutes sustainable? I'm not sure it's sustainable for Detroit to win games like this, but it worked for them this week. And it was interesting at the end of the game, Rasmussen and Jack Hughes. Like, Jack Hughes, he's going to have that next Red Wing games circled. He's going to be like, okay, you got me there, but I'll get you back next time. Like, that thing about Rasmussen, I guarantee to you, like, all those guys who work on the Detroit front office, like the Yzermans, the Chris Drapers, and the Sean Horkoffs, their nipples were erect after they saw that play.
Oh, jeez. Why did you have to describe it that way? There's so many other ways you could have gone with that.
It's the first thing that popped into my head. I couldn't think of anything else.
It makes it even worse.
That's true. It kind of does. I would bet that those guys who run the Red Wings are sitting there and saying, that is the kind of swagger that we need.
Right. And what else is Rasmussen supposed to do there on the empty net goal?
Well, there might have been guys who might have ducked out of the way. Like, you see it now. Like, some guys do that. But, like, if you're the Red Wings, like the Red Wings, they have really talented players. But what's their identity, Kyle? What's their identity?
Right. I think they're still trying to figure it out a little bit.
I think a play like that could go a long way. A long way. Like he stands over him. There's a scrum after, and that was a mean game. Like, Kovacevic and Sherratt had a fight. The poor Red Wings TV, they thought the whole scrum was over, and they're showing a replay, and all of a sudden those two guys just dropped the gloves. Like the Red Wings, that you can tell, like those Red Wings teams, when they were great, they were still really mean. Like, they had the grind line.
Oh, yeah.
They had Shanahan. They had Konstantinov, great player. Like, they were a mean team. And they've been kind of, I don't know, bland, for lack of a better term. Like, a play like that, you're probably sitting there in that room or running that organization, and you're like, man, did we need something like that. Man, did we need something that made us look like we have swagger.
A little bit of momentum going for Detroit here now. Okay, elsewhere, Elliotte, you had today that Chad Ruhwedel was placed on waivers by the New York Rangers. I don't know, looking at the injury issues that have come about Utah HC in recent days, do you see a connection between the two possibly there?
I don't understand why not. I mean, the thing about Ruhwedel is he's a solid player. He's been on a Stanley Cup team before, Pittsburgh. You need somebody in a stopgap. They really don't want anyone with term, and he's on like a minimum salary. I think, to me, it screams Utah, but we'll see. We'll see what they want to do. It makes a lot of sense. He's not much of an offensive player, obviously, but he's a solid, capable NHL player. So wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. And Kyle, before we go to the final thought, we should tack on a couple of things. Number one, my prediction this year for the Hart Trophy was Quinn Hughes. I got texted tonight and told I picked the wrong defenseman. That there is a defenseman this year who's going to win the Hart Trophy, but it's not Quinn Hughes. It is Cale Makar, this person told me. The only defenseman ever to win the Art Ross Trophy is Bobby Orr. He did it twice. He won the scoring title in 1970 and 1975. It is still early, It is only a week before Halloween, but Cale Makar leads the league in scoring. And the one thing I liked about Colorado last week, I don't have a lot of good predictions this year, but I've got two of them that look like they're going to stand really well right now. Number one, that Colorado was not rolling over, that they were still playing hard and they were going to sort this out. They just swept a road trip, San Jose, Seattle, and Utah, despite all their injuries. Goal-scoring sensation Ross Colton got hurt this game. Jared Bednar said he took a slash on the hand and couldn't come back, but they still won. And I think the interesting thing here is now what's going to happen. Noonan has solidified their goaltending. Kakkonen is in the AHL on a conditioning stint. I'm curious to see what's going to happen here. When Kakkonen is ready, do they carry three guys? Do they do something else? But Noonan solidified them this week, and Colorado sent a message they are far from done. And then there's another one of my good predictions. Winnipeg, now 7-0 after they beat Seattle in overtime, blew a lead, but still won the game. The only perfect team in the NHL, and we will see them on Saturday night against the Calgary Flames. And I'll say something about the Jets too. Just talking to some members of the Blues, because they were in Toronto obviously on Thursday. They were one of the teams that the Jets beat. The Blues actually outplayed them for a lot of that game, but the Jets scored 3 goals in 12 minutes, and then Hellebuck made that massive save late in the third period. They said the Jets are confident, very confident group, which is exactly what hurt them last year. They fell apart in the playoffs. They lost their confidence. They panicked against the Avalanche. If they can keep that confidence, that's important for them.
Okay, that'll take us to our final thought, which is brought to you by GMC. The news on Thursday, Elliotte, Shea Theodore, the Vegas Golden Knights coming together on a 7-year contract extension. $7.425 million is the AAV, so just over a $2 million bump from where he had been at for the last 7-year contract he had with Vegas. Any of this surprise you?
No, not really. Like, during the summer, a couple of people had told me, because you start to look at, okay, who's unsigned going into next year, and I always thought that Draisaitl was going to sign, and I've said that I thought Rantanen was going to resign, although that one I do believe has been complicated by the Draisaitl number. So that one I think has been a little bit harder than everybody expected and or hoped in Colorado. We'll see where that goes. But, Theodore was right atop the defense list. But I had people say to me, don't go crazy with this one. Like, it's going to get figured out. Don't go crazy with it. And I think it took longer than some people expected, but eventually it did get done. This is the thing about Vegas. Like, they generally feel and they generally sign the guys that they want to sign. They gave him the big bonus structure. They gave him a lot of no trade protection. They got a number lower than he probably could have got on the open market. I mean, there's always the question about no tax versus tax, but it's a great number for player and team. I mean, he's going to make $50 million, and Vegas gets him at a number that probably from pure cap point of view was going to be less than he was going to get elsewhere. But I'm not surprised it happened. I think Vegas really wanted to get it done. The whole thing here, and I don't know the answer to this question, but I was talking about it with somebody today after the signing was announced. Vegas tried to get Marchand with deferred money, and Marchand had talked about that. That's not a new story. And I don't know if that was discussed here at all or not. But someone said to me that the deferred money thing might not actually work for Vegas because they're a no-tax state, that if you go somewhere else after Vegas, then you could actually lose money by taking deferred amounts because if you go live somewhere which is a higher tax rate, and almost everywhere would have a higher tax rate than Vegas, it doesn't make sense for you. So I thought that was very interesting. They just said to me, this is why the Golden Knights might have trouble doing this deferred money thing, because it doesn't make sense if you're going to a higher tax area. But I'm not surprised about this one in the least bit. I think there were lots of teams that would have tried to go after Theodore if he was available. The Golden Knights obviously knew that. And at the end of the day, he wanted to be there.
Of all the moves that they did around the expansion draft back in 2017, that may turn out to be one of the shrewdest in getting Shea Theodore out of Anaheim. Don't you think, looking back now?
I think the Marchessault one was brilliant because it got them Marchessault and Riley Smith. I mean, William Karlsson was a great find. I can't argue with you. I thought that was a great one. And Karlsson's supposed to make his season debut this weekend, but they had a few that they really used that expansion draft beautifully. They wrote a template for how to get it done, and they deserve a lot of credit for it. The one thing I do wonder about on their blue line now is Hague. And, you take a look at it, you've got Pietrangelo who shoots left, and he's got 2 more years. They just signed Hanifin, he shoots left. They've obviously just signed Theodore, he shoots left. And they've got Hague who shoots left. And Hague is in the last year of his deal. He's got 1 more year after this before UFA. So he's got 1 year of RFA until UFA. I got to say, like, that Hague, I think he's a really good player. And, we're talking to Broberg on this pod, and Broberg talks about one of the reasons he was happy to go to St. Louis was because look at the left side of that Edmonton blue line. Like, there's a lot of bodies there. And so the more bodies you have, the harder it is to, A, get playing time, and B, get as big a salary as you want. And the thing I wonder about with Hague, who's a really good defenseman and 25 years old, is, what's this going to mean for his future? They've got a lot of left-hand shots, and, they've got a lot of guys who are paid big money who deserve it. And like I said, Vegas generally keeps who they want to keep. But I do wonder what this is going to mean for Hague's future, both in terms of what they can fit and, what kind of role he can have. But that's a question probably for another day.
All righty. And on that note, that was the final thought brought to you by GMC. Elliotte, I'm glad you brought it up because we hadn't yet in this episode that later on we will be speaking with Philip Broberg, one of the newest members of the St. Louis Blues. Had a chance to chat with him earlier this week. Before that, though, we will take a break. When we come back, the Thought Line. You're listening to 32 Thoughts, the podcast. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. All right, time now for the Thought Line. A reminder, the phone number to call, 1-833-311-3232. The email address, 32thoughts@sportsnet.ca. And Elliotte,
yes,
as you know, and we can both appreciate, any good bit, as fun as it is, they all have an expiry date at some point. And I thought we had got there Monday with the triangle, but there's one final entrant that was too good to leave out that came in the last couple of days. So I've got to read it here to kick things off on this one. Okay, you ready? This is an anonymous emailer who works backstage for a major North American orchestra.
Oh, wow.
Smokes. Okay.
Now, I have to say this. My son, Max, he does not care what I do for a living. He is completely unimpressed. But when I tell him, because he's very musically inclined, when I tell him that someone worked at a symphony, wrote into the pod, for the first time in 13 years, he will be proud of his father.
Congratulations, Elliotte. You did it!
It's a warm feeling, I have to say that.
Okay, here we go. Gentlemen, I know you got grief on the triangle player metaphor on behalf of triangle players in their newly realized, marginalized, and offended group status. However, I don't believe the party went far enough in his or her denouncement. People give the triangle player a rough time. However, let me position it this way. There are usually 22 to 26 violinists, 8 to 12 violists, 6 to 10 cellists, and 5 to 8 bassists on stage at an orchestral concert. There is one triangle player. Now picture one of 26 violinists coming in a bar late. Now picture the triangle player coming in a bar late. That is why your metaphor breaks down. That one person is doing the equivalent of ringing a doorbell on stage at a classical music concert, and it can only make sense in that one moment. Tell me that's not pressure. String players have admittedly way more notes to play, but they can sometimes play like LeBron James and pick their moments and take a defensive possession off every once in a while. All in good fun. And unfortunately, I have to keep this anonymous because some of my best friends are string players.
You know what's going to happen now? The string players are going to start writing in.
That's right. You don't know how hard it is.
We think this is over. This is not over.
No, it's got to be over. We have to move on.
I have to say this. This is why I love the listeners of this pod. We just took a triangle bit for 2 weeks. If it wasn't for all of your greatness and creativity out there, the triangle bit could not have lasted for 2 weeks.
Well said. Well said. This has been fun. And something out of nothing. Those are sometimes the most fun.
100%.
Okay, next. A real question here. Chris from Steinbach, Manitoba. Hey there, Elliotte and Kyle. On Sunday, it was Brian Little Day for the Jets, and I've always wondered, someone who signs a one-day contract to retire with a team and have a ceremony for them, would they technically be allowed to play in one more game? I'm sure Little has at least one more shift in him, wondering if it has ever happened or just not allowed. Always love the pod and keep it going.
It is B. It's not allowed. These are special ceremonial contracts that allow a player to officially, quote unquote, sign with the team and take the warm up as Little did. It's also good for availabilities. It gives a picture, scenic, some video. The fans can see it at the press conference, but it's purely a ceremonial thing. And Little would have to be cleared for both the salary cap and health wise, because remember, he didn't play for a few years while his contract played out. He would have to be cleared in both those situations to play. So it is purely ceremonial.
But you know what I do love, Elliotte? It seems like we're seeing it more and more. We saw it with Brian Little, but when players do have their retirement night that's incorporated with a home game, that they're putting the gear on. They're actually getting out for like we saw it with Alex Edler with Vancouver.
Alfredsson did it a few years ago.
He took warm-ups in Ottawa.
Yes.
When Kevin Bieksa, our colleague, had his night, he came out on the ice in full gear again. Great moment waving to the crowd. I love that that's becoming more and more common.
I think it's great. I think it's great for the fans. I think it's great for the players. I'm with you. I think it's a fantastic idea. Fantastic.
Yeah, so Chris, thank you for that question. The next one, a voicemail. Taylor in Victoria, BC.
Just had a quick question about GMs and ownership. Wondering the last time we saw an owner actually perform as a general manager for their team. I'm not a billionaire, but I can't imagine it's easy to give anybody hundreds of millions of dollars and let them kind of just spend it how they want to. Anyways, thanks for everything. Love the pod.
So I had to reach out to the Hall of Fame on this one, Elliotte, because, I mean, gosh, my knowledge of ownership and team executives, certainly earlier than the turn of the century, is limited. So here are some names that I got. One of the current ones, not NHL related, but Mark Hunter, owner, also GM of the London Knights of the OHL. Mm-hmm. There's one.
I believe in junior hockey that would happen in a lot of places.
Correct. So in terms of the NHL, Conn Smythe with the Leafs, owner, GM, coach for a time. Lester Patrick, owned the Victoria Aristocats and Cougars. They were not part of the NHL. They're the PCHA, the Pacific
Wait a sec. The
Coast.
Aristocats or the Aristocrats?
Sorry, Aristocrats. I read that wrong.
Mama, do we have to waddle like they do?
Yes, dear. Think goose.
Have you been watching jokes lately or reading jokes lately? Did you watch that movie recently? Oh, my God.
No, I haven't.
Oh, my goodness. That was fantastic.
Aristocrats. My goodness, doing this on the fly. The Aristocrats and Cougars. So they were in the Pacific Coast Hockey Association. And he was part of management as well. You're not going to be able to get that out of your head now.
No, I'm not. Okay. Good one, Lester Patrick. Okay.
And Leo Dandurand, part owner of the Montreal Canadiens for a time, and GM from 1919 to kind of the mid-30s. Those were the names that I was able to dig up to help answer this question. We forget about the Aristocats, though. What a franchise back in the day.
Yeah, yes, we certainly do. It's funny, before the pod, we don't often check these in advance. We like to come in fresh. But Dom listened to this one, and he checked on Chat GPT, and they were giving him answers like Harold Ballard and Ted Leonsis, people who were never actually GMs, but they were incredibly involved, which was kind of funny. I will say that there have been occasional situations where I think general managers have either been offered or have taken like small, tiny minority pieces in teams. There was one not too long ago that everybody kind of suspected, but nobody really knew for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some managers who had minority shares. But as for like actual majority owners being the GM, it happens obviously very rarely. There was a famous one in baseball about 40 years ago where Ted Turner, who owned the Atlanta Braves, actually made himself the manager for like a day. And then Major League Baseball stepped in and said, no more of this craziness. They banned it.
Oh, wow. That's very Ted Turner. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Great memory on that one. And thank you, Taylor, for the question.
It's a pretty famous story.
I was too busy reading up on the Aristocats, clearly. I missed that one. All right. Eric from Saskatoon. My question is regarding the cameras that the away team uses on their broadcasts. Does the home team have cameras available for the away team's broadcast? For example, when teams such as Florida make their way through Western Canada, I can't see them bringing all the cameras with them and having time to set up and tear down before they go on to the next city. Thanks for the great pod, great insider information, and great hair. Eric,
I think he's talking to you about that one.
I was going to say, hot air in the hair. It's back. You want to start with this one?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I actually really do enjoy the television technical questions, and I actually also enjoy how much the fans are kind of interested in how the cheese sandwiches are made or the sausage gets made, whichever you prefer. So they don't travel with cameras all the time, but basically what it works is that it depends on the arena, it depends on how much money you want to spend, and it depends on the team. But for example, if you're ever at, say, Scotiabank Arena, because that's the arena I know best, near the top of the lower bowl, there are about 4 pretty interesting, like newish cameras that are always there. And there's cameramen or camera people working them. And those are the play-by-play cameras. And basically the way it works is one camera is the home team, one camera is the visiting team. Sometimes there'll be another camera if there's like the French broadcast is there, the third team, and sometimes it could have like another feed. It's 3 or 4 of them. You'll see them the next time. If you ever go to a game at Scotiabank Arena, it's near the top of the lower bowl and you can't miss them once you're looking for it. But like now in this day and age where people are trying to save money a bit, especially if it's not like a huge game, yes, you can share cameras. Now, the disadvantage is, Kyle, is that usually the home team, which has more production there, they control those cameras. So your director, if they want to, can switch onto those cameras and they can use them or quote unquote borrow them. And there's usually 4 or 5 a game that happens to, but you don't control them. So you're at the mercy of whatever they put on the screen. But it is not unusual for teams to share cameras. Like the buildings usually have dedicated cameras for the opposing broadcast. But if you say, oh, I want a few more angles or I want to borrow some extra angles, then you can ask the home team for permission to use them when they're on.
That's correct. And typically, like the actual, as you say, the hard cameras themselves will not travel, depending on the production group and how they want to go about crewing games when they're on the road. Sometimes they will have their own camera people that they will travel with, but that doesn't happen as often anymore. As you say, budget a big part of it, but certainly like for us in the playoffs, as you can imagine, bigger games, a bigger traveling crew, both technically and on the production and commentating side. But that's part of it as well, because, you know, as you say, for the example, Florida going up into Western Canada, they would likely rent a production truck that would be on site there for the day and hire a lot of their technical staff would be locals that are freelance that live in the area. And whenever, whether it's Florida, Carolina, Dallas, Los Angeles, when they come in through town, those people are often hired to work for that team's regional broadcast on that night.
Well, let me ask you another follow-up because I think this is interesting. Because you travel more in the playoffs than I do. I travel for the final, and we have a big crew traveling for that. But for what's the basic crew that always travels for a game? Like, there's a producer that always travels. There's a director that always travels.
Yep.
Like, what other positions do you always see? Like, you're going to Boston this weekend. What other positions will always travel?
So typically for us, for Leafs games on Saturdays, you're right. We have a producer that travels. The core production crew will typically always travel and be on site with us every week. So producer, director, our statistician, our assistant director, so to help just keeping track of timing throughout the night, commercial breaks and everything. Obviously our commentators, lead audio, our technical director, the person that's what's known as switching, so actually pressing the buttons as you're watching at home, that's making the cameras cut from one angle to the next or go to a replay or a graphic, making all that happen. Our lead font coordinator, also someone that's called an ISO director, so they sit in the back of the truck with the EVS operators, and those are the men and women that are tasked with turning around replays or any other archived video packages that we'll have ready to show at some point during the game if it calls for it, helping run all of that and be in constant contact with the producer as the night unfolds. So there's still a good amount, close to about 20 people. Also, those that run the robotic cameras, so different from the big hard cameras that you pointed out, Elliotte, that you can see kind of on one side at the top of the 100 levels at Scotiabank Arena and a lot of buildings around the NHL. So again, because it's the Leafs, that would be on the higher side in terms of traveling production, because it's one of the big shows for Sportsnet every week, and there's the higher number of resources that go and travel and be on site for the games. But also too, just people on the engineering side and managing the production truck itself. If anything goes wrong there, have somebody that we know to help troubleshoot. That's also like those types of roles that you never see when you're watching a game from your couch, but critical to make a broadcast work and run smoothly.
And in the playoffs, we travel 50 or 60 people for the final?
Yeah, at least that.
You're gonna get into Boston on Friday today, and someone from the crew is gonna come up to you and say you left out my position.
I was trying to make sure I got everyone. Yeah.
I cannot wait to hear who says you left me out.
I tried to get in as many as I could, but I just went and looked back quickly here for the Stanley Cup final last year. Yeah, we were north of 60. Not all of them were directly involved with the broadcast itself, but It's a pretty big traveling party once you reach the Stanley Cup final, as you say every year for us.
Good answer. Good job. Can't wait to see who you left out.
Great. Thank you, Elliotte. And seriously, thank you, Eric, for that question. All right. Kurt. Hello, Elliotte, Kyle, and the 32 Thoughts staff. My friends and I were watching the Habs and Islanders game on the weekend after seeing the teams get lower and lower into their lineup looking for shooters. Yeah, 9-round shootout, that one went. A question came to mind. Who has played the most NHL games without a shootout attempt? We think Ryan Suter, but I want to see what you come up with. Thank you. Love the show. I am a new listener this year and excited for what's to come. Welcome, Kurt.
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Do you have a guess?
Do you know the answer?
I do.
Okay. Is Ryan Suter the right answer?
Yeah, they were bang on.
Wow.
He is number one.
Good. Hey, Kurt.
He is number one.
Kurt, you should be hosting this podcast. You shouldn't be listening to it. You should be the co-host. You can pick which one of us is leaving and you can take over.
Ryan Suter.
When he said it, I was like, I can't even think of anybody better than that. Well, I'm trying to think, like, do you have a list of who else is close?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me.
Number 2 on this list.
Hold on.
Hold on. No. You hold on. No, I would just say number 2 on this list behind Suter. It shocked me. That's all I would say. So Ryan Suter, 1,451 career games, no shootout attempts.
Wow. Okay, so you were shocked by number 2. Is this an active player?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it's somebody who you'd think of would be a scorer.
Well, it's just one of those like where you're going, honestly, he hasn't had one. That was my first thought anyways. You may think different.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't know. I would probably think similarly to you. I am going to go with Ryan O'Reilly.
Ooh, good guess, but no. Ready for the answer?
It's a good guess until he's absolutely offended I guessed that. Narrow it down for me a bit.
Okay, Metro Division.
Metro Division.
Is a forward.
Okay, I was guessing that. You know what, there's probably some teams' fans right now that's screaming it out there because they all know the answer.
Started their career in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. Hold on. That took away my number 1 guess, actually, when you said Metro Division. Who is it?
Jordan Staal.
Really? He's never had a shootout attempt? You know what? This is going to be terrible because I actually forgot that Jordan Staal started in Pittsburgh. I was going to say my first guess was going to be Sean Couturier. And then I was going to go with Connor Sheary once you said Pittsburgh, but I was like, he's not even in the Metro Division. He plays in Tampa.
Right.
I forgot. I completely forgot he started in Pittsburgh. That's pathetic.
Yeah. Won a cup there in 2009. I think 5-time 20-goal scorer. And Joshua Lassard at our Sportsnet stats department said that he has appeared in 130 career games that went to a shootout. Never been picked. Now, I wonder how many times where it's like, okay, you're up next, but then the shootout ends like the guy before he would go. But 0 for a guy that's played over 1,250 games. Color me surprised.
Wow, I'm shocked at that. That's a good one. Good question.
Good guess. They were right on it with the Suter.
Yeah, excellent
And welcome
guess.
again to the podcast, Kurt.
Yep, future co-host.
Okay, it's right. Dom Shamati will be in touch with you shortly. Okay, Elliotte, we are finishing the thought line this week with not a question, but one I thought was a neat one to wrap up with. Sean from Durham, North Carolina. Kyle, Elliotte, and Dom. I was listening to the pod on my drive into work and caught the question about donated hats from Hat Tricks. I work for a homeless service at a not-for-profit in Durham, Open Table Ministry, and we have previously received hats from the Carolina Hurricanes. The specific hat trick was Marty Necas against the Avalanche this past February, a natural hat trick in the first period, I might add. The hats really make a difference for folks experiencing homelessness and are a point of connection for people who love hockey. I have had multiple neighbors I work with proudly show me their Canes hats. Just wanted to drop this quick line to say how impactful the work NHL teams do in their communities, especially my beloved Canes. Thanks for the pod, gentlemen, and let's go Canes. How cool is that?
Well, great job. First of all, thank you for sending in that note. We really appreciate that you would share that with us. Secondly, good job to the Canes and good jobs to any other teams that donate, because I'm sure that the people who have those hats donated to feel just as empowered and good about themselves as those people who got the Carolina hats did. So that's fantastic stuff. Really appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, wonderful stuff, Sean. Thank you again. And a final time, the number for the Thought Line, 1-833-311-3232, 32 thoughts at sportsnet.ca. When we come back, our sit-down interview with Philip Broberg of the St. Louis Blues. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to 32 Thoughts, the podcast. As mentioned earlier this week, Elliotte and I got a chance to sit down with Philip Broberg of the St. Louis Blues the night before he and the St. Louis Blues beat the Maple Leafs in their building. Broberg opened the scoring on Thursday night, but before that, and after bearing Toronto traffic to get to their hotel downtown, he was able to spend a few minutes with us. We talked about the crazy summer it was for Broberg with the offer sheet, and Elliotte had a great question about who he kept that news from until it all became public, and of course the playoff run with the Edmonton Oilers as well. So here now, our chat with Philip Broberg.
Okay, I want to play true or false with you. 2 questions. Number 1, true or false? When you knew about the offer sheet, you didn't tell your parents.
True.
Why didn't you tell them?
Because you never know it's going to happen until it happens. So no need to speculate, or when you never know if it would happen until, it did happen. So
what did they say when they found out about it?
Well, of course, they were happy for me, and, wanted to hear what I thought about it and everything. So they were happy for me.
Okay, second question, true or false? You went to Connor McDavid's wedding knowing that this was going to happen, but you didn't tell a soul.
False.
Okay, all right.
You never know it's going to happen. Obviously, I was at the wedding, incredible wedding, and, you never know what's going to happen, obviously.
Okay, because one of the stories that we heard was like you knew it was going to happen, but you're like, I'm not interfering with this wedding. I'm not saying a word about it.
No, that's not true.
Okay, too bad, because it would have been a great story.
So when did you get a sense, though, then that, this season you were likely, or there was a chance you'd be somewhere other than Edmonton? When did that thought first start to come into your mind?
You always hear noise, that stuff could happen, and, stuff started to come up, that it was a possibility, and, when it finally did happen, obviously I was intrigued, and, I thought it was a great opportunity for me, and, I'm glad it happened. I had a good time in Edmonton and enjoyed it, but, I think I was ready for a new chapter.
It's interesting you say that, because there are some players in the past that they've been asked by their agents, would you consider an offer sheet? And they said, no, I don't want to do that. So when Darren Ferris, who represents you, first said this could happen, was there any part of you that said, you know what, I don't want to be the guy who's going through this?
You always, think twice. Obviously, it's a big decision, and, you gotta think about all the possibilities and all the pros and cons, and I think I'm happy with my decision. I took my time to think about it, and I'm happy to be a Blue.
What was it like when it got out? What was your phone like?
No, it was busy, obviously. That whole week, you didn't know what's going to happen, obviously. Friends reaching out and stuff, but I'm glad it's over, and it's not like that anymore.
What was the funniest text or phone call, or the strangest or wildest text or phone call you got?
Nothing that really sticks out. Everybody was just wondering what's going on and what it meant. I think not everybody knows what it meant. So you just had to do some explaining, I guess.
Did you learn anything about yourself just going through it, and something that is so public and that everyone was talking about? Like, what was your takeaways after the dust settled?
I think, obviously it was a stressful time, and, I think the biggest thing was that you just gotta do what you can control, and, you just go to work during off-season and go and train and do what you can do, and not be on social media too much. Obviously not read much.
Were you good at that?
I was.
Really?
So I just tried to stay away.
I understand that Dylan took a bit more convincing, and there was a big call that happened with you and Dylan, and I guess your representatives were on it. Did you talk Dylan into saying yes to this at all?
No, like you said, we were on a call together and talking about the possibility and everything that could happen, and we both shared our opinion, and we both ended up being blue. So no, I'm happy that I got Holloway, with me to Blues. I think that made the transition easier for both of us.
Did you talk him into it?
No, I think he has his own decision, obviously, but I'm glad he came with me. I think that helped for sure. Made the transition easier. I didn't know a lot of guys on the team before, so made it easier to have Halsey with me.
Now, did when this was getting close, what did you think was going to happen? After it was signed and Edmonton had the week, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think they were going to match, or did you think they weren't going to match?
Honestly, I had no clue. Obviously, I didn't really. I actually didn't know. You sit there and wait for the decision, I guess, and you just wait to see where you're going to be playing that year.
What excited you about St. Louis? Because it was reported you have a couple of teams that were interested in the summer. What about St. Louis?
Well, I think they have a very good team, and a lot of good young players coming up, and I think it's a good opportunity for me to looking to help the team in any way I can.
Do you think of it as, even though I don't have final control in the decision, I'm a Blue. I signed with the Blues. I would like to be a Blue. Is that the way you think, or do you think I can't get too excited about it because I could still be an Oiler?
Well, it's always a possibility that they could match, I guess. But yeah, of course, when you sign it, you think that you're Blue. But I think we took the decision to sign the offer sheet, obviously, and I'm just happy to be Blue right now.
So then, last one for me on this topic. Once it all kind of unfolded, who was the first, I guess now current teammate in St. Louis to reach out, and what was that interaction like? Do you remember?
The first person that reached out?
Yeah, with the Blues that would have said, "Hey, welcome."
Probably Shanner.
Okay.
Reached out, just text, and we jumped on a call after as well. So I think he was one of the first that reached out, but a lot of other guys reached out as well.
Have any players, just outside of the Oilers or the Blues, said anything to you about it?
Talked about it?
Yeah, or just spoken to you about it?
Not really. I think everybody knows it's a business side to things in between the players, and everybody kind of understands, and use wishes everybody well, and good luck, kind of.
Because one player who doesn't know you, this guy I talked to, and I sent him a note that we were speaking, and he said, tell him thanks, and because that's going to create more of this, and there's always one person that has to go first, and particularly in hockey, it's not easy to be the person who stands up and says, I'm going to do this. And his reaction was, tell him thanks, because we hope it's going to be the first of many. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it was a very special circumstance, I guess. It's not a lot of offer sheets happening, but I think it happened with two players going to a new team. I think it was exciting for sure, but I guess we'll have to find out if it's going to happen more.
And you're glad that you're not going to be the next one.
Yeah.
I guess the last one on this particular topic for me is Kyle mentioned there were other teams. Did you think it was going to be St. Louis, or did you think it was going to be someone else?
Well, like I said before, you never know until it happened, and I'm glad it became St. Louis that did it, and I'm glad to be Blue.
I take it you're not going to tell us who else was involved.
I actually don't know.
Okay. Okay. Obviously, I just wanted to ask you about last season. You had a great playoff once you got in. How did you feel after it was all over?
Obviously, we had a great playoff run there, and we came very close to the ultimate goal. So obviously, it took some time to kind of let that go, but obviously it was fun to get in and play some games there in the playoffs.
The Dallas series, right? You come in Game 4. I remember it felt like there was so much tension around everything going into that game. I mean, you guys had dropped Game 3. It was only 2-1 in the series, but it just felt the magnitude was so high. So you play that game, you win, but your goal in Game 5 to make it 3-0 at the time on the road. I just remember the whole building, like everything changed there when you made it 3-0. It was like the Dallas fans were going, oh my gosh, like the series is slipping away. What do you remember about that moment and that night?
No, obviously it was great to get into the playoffs there in Game 4, and I just remember it was off a face-off, I believe, and just tried to get it to the net, and it was I was glad to see it go in, obviously, and we ended up winning the game and that series as well. So, it was exciting times for sure.
Right. Posting in, like it wasn't just in, it was perfectly placed.
Yeah. No, it was, posting in and, just happy it went in.
What does that do for a player's confidence? I wonder, obviously, you're waiting there patiently to hopefully get a chance, and then to have a moment like that, like how much does that change how you feel on the ice, on the bench, everything after that point?
I think just to get into the playoffs and play and feel like you can help the team is for sure a confidence boost, and feeling like you could help the team win games and contribute. I think that's the biggest thing, and for sure brings confidence.
Having Paul Coffey to work with there in Edmonton, was there one thing that he said or advice that he gave you that you think, yeah, as time goes on here, that's always going to be somewhere in my mind?
I think Coffey was always great, and I think the biggest thing was he wanted me to play my game and make plays out there, and trust myself, and wanted to make plays, and just make plays pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the confidence grow on you as the deeper Edmonton went. You guys beat Dallas. You go on to the final. How did you feel differently after the season was over?
Well, I think as you start to reflect over the year, and it was a very up and down year. Spent a lot of time in Bakersfield, and came up in the end of the season, and got the chance to play in the playoffs, and I just tried to play as I did in the AHL and tried to bring that game, fast hockey, and use my skating as much as I can. And I think that for sure helped my confidence, that felt like I could play on the playoffs, which was always fun.
Too much left side in Edmonton, right? Like you looked at it and it was just like there were too many bodies there. Is that what it looked like to you?
Well, I think they have a very good decor in Edmonton, and you have Ekholm, great player, Nurse, also very good player, Kulak the same. So I had to play a lot on my offside, and I've done that a lot in Sweden. before, so I'm used to it for sure. But it's different playing the right side on the smaller ice surface for
Too
sure.
fast.
It makes you kind of stuck in some situation, I guess, on the right side. But I've done it before, and I was comfortable playing right side as well.
You know what? One of the stories they told me was, I guess you had a game in Bakersfield last year. You had played like 38 minutes, and they went up to you after the game and they said, "How do you feel?" And you said something like, "I could have played 5 more." And they kind of laughed about it. They said, "This is a confident guy, like a really confident guy."
I remember that game, and it's. I played a lot of minutes down there, and it was a lot of fun. Great group of guys down there, and I think for sure it helped my game to kind of go down there and play a lot of minutes, important minutes, and kind of bring that game up here then.
So I was looking. I mean, you had 3 games in your career prior to this season of logging north of 20 minutes in a game, and you've already done that 4 times this season out of the gate. How different is the game for yourself when you're at that workload as opposed to something a lot less?
Well, I think you get into games quicker, you start to feel more comfortable and confident out there as well. You start to get into the flow, I would say. So I for sure think it makes you go and play on your instincts more, I would say.
What's your VO2 score? I'm curious now.
It was a long time ago since I did it, but I believe I was maybe 63, somewhere
so
around
pretty
there.
like Duncan Keith is like the legendary guy. I think he's the guy who got into the 70s.
Yeah.
And Thomas Chabot is the guy who says, like, I can play 40 minutes because I don't feel it out there. You're one of those guys too, right? Like, you can just go forever.
Well, I would believe I train pretty hard in summers and try to stay prepared. But I think I try to use my skating as much as I can, and try to I think just kind of use my skating as much as I can.
Is there anybody out there you've seen that you like say like that's the way I like to emulate? Like the guy I like to copy or keep an eye on?
To copy my game?
Or just like the way that has that high level of, I guess, stamina that can play as much as you can or Chabot can, or and you say, like, that's what I can do. I can do something like that too.
Well, I think you have a lot of D-men in this league that log a lot of minutes. You have Heiskanen, obviously, that plays a lot of minutes for Dallas, and you have a lot of other guys as well that logs a lot of minutes. So I think I think it's an advantage for sure.
Swedes aren't supposed to say nice things about Finns, you know that.
I know.
I heard you're a heck of a soccer player too. Is that true? And perhaps does that play a role in your endurance as well?
I wouldn't say I'm a great soccer player. I don't know who said that. I would say I'm a okay soccer player. So I'm not sure who told you that.
So they were good. They said, you're good at soccer, and you think you're good at golf. That's what I was told.
That might be fair.
Good.
Do you win the pregame soccer a lot, the sewer ball?
I would call myself pretty average, I would say. I win sometimes and sometimes I don't. I play a lot though, for sure. But I win sometimes and sometimes I don't, obviously.
Who's good?
Like that on our team?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think PO is good.
Mm-hmm. Who's not good and thinks they're good?
Who think they're good,
but isn't.
I'll say Holloway.
And in golf, who's not good and thinks they're good? Besides you, apparently.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people I play golf with is like that play hockey is very good, I would say.
I'm always really impressed, like just walking by sometimes and catching you guys playing sewer ball before games. Like for hockey players, there's a lot of good ball control out there. Like, I imagine the level of those games can get pretty high at times when you've got some good players when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of the game.
Yeah, it gets intense sometimes. Some days are better than some, I would say. But, I think you play a lot throughout the year, and so I think it gets better for every game.
I just want to ask, too, about your jersey number. So you're wearing 6, and it seemed like you've worn a number of different ones. Right? You're 86 in Edmonton. I saw 5, 4, 25, 2. What led you to 6? Clearly you're not superstitious about it.
Well, I think, a lot of the numbers I've had in the past were taken here in St. Louis. And, I think it's a classic number to have a single-digit number, and so it ended up being 6, and I like it so far.
Great, yeah, you look good in it too.
Best thing about St. Louis?
The restaurants. I think they had some very good hidden restaurants, and so no, it's been good.
So for the foodies who listen to this podcast, where do you have to go in St. Louis, and what do you eat there?
A lot of pasta. I think they have a lot of good pasta restaurant.
Are you a chicken parm guy?
No. I like ravioli. Ravioli is a favorite of mine.
Meat or cheese?
I think both is great, to be honest.
Either is acceptable. And I guess I just wanted to ask you about the final last year. Like, we've seen in the Amazon documentary a lot of interesting things about the Oilers at the final. What stood out for you, either in those two scenes or just in general? What stood out for you?
Throughout, the finals?
Yeah.
Well, I think the resilience of the group. We're down 3-0, and obviously we came back to force a game 7. So I would say that, and I think it showed a lot of emotions in the locker room, I guess. But I think it's all fun looking back to it, and I think it was a great experience. Obviously we didn't win it, but you try to take as much experience you can from that.
Are you nervous at all about going back there this year as a Blue?
No, I think it'll be fun. They obviously have a good team there, and I think it's going to be a good game.
Last one for me is, you said you felt you took a step in those playoffs, understandably. So what's next for you? Where'd you like to go from there?
Just get better every day. It's I think you try to take steps every summer, every season, and you just get better. And I think you try to obviously take from the playoffs and go from there and try to get better throughout the year.
And just last one for me, players go through a lot of things in their careers. There's ups, there's downs. You went through a thing this summer where there was a lot of attention to it. For any player who might be nervous about anything like this in the future, what's the advice you would give them?
Just trust yourself, and don't be on social media too much, obviously, and just not watching your phone too much, I would say.
Excellent advice. I think for everybody everywhere in the world, not watching social media on the phone is great advice.
Yeah.
Philip, this was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Congrats on your start, and all the best the rest of the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to Dan O'Neill and the St. Louis Blues for helping arrange that conversation for us. Thank you to Stephen Coyle, who helped manage all the audio technical side for that interview. That'll do it for us this edition of 32 Thoughts, the podcast. Reminder, tonight, Friday night, you can see nationally on Sportsnet 1, the Edmonton Oilers host Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Congratulations to Craig McTavish. He'll be honored going into the Oilers Wall of Fame after the game on Friday night as well. It gets underway at 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain Time. Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday. Hockey Central Saturday gets underway 6:30 Eastern. We talked about it earlier. Toronto, Boston at 7 Eastern. Montreal, St. Louis, Winnipeg, Calgary. All the early games. Vancouver, Pittsburgh. Double dose of the Pens this weekend on the network is the nightcap. Enjoy all of it. Have yourselves a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.